Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Wednesday, March 16th, 2022. I probably should be saying the year since some of these videos are going to air in reruns years later. Also, video game news and all of that. So, there's apparently a card issue here. Let's see. The card effect text is scheduled to be updated in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Official card game. So this is weird because it seems like what they're trying to do is in the official card game, the real world having the printed cards, Knight Assailant is going to have its text changed, but that means people will have the old version of the card, and at a certain point it would make more sense for them to just straight up ban Knight Assailant and make a new card. Even if it was something as simple as Knight Assailant version 2.0, and that was just what you called it. So you can definitely do that digitally in something like Master Duel, but it's a lot harder to implement that and enforce that overall. Like, if we were to look at all the cards here and then say, show me all the forbidden cards, and then include cards that we don't own, you can see that there's not a particularly long list of cards here that are completely forbidden. So you'd almost have to assume that things like these cards simply could not have been changed in small increments, and they're just doing something that either from day one or later on proved to be completely useless, or completely unplayable. And at a certain point, if this list of forbidden cards was too big, people wouldn't be able to identify the cards that were banned. Although in most cases, I don't think most people would be able to identify the cards that are banned anyways. Like, I recognize Cyber Jar, but I don't recognize it as a card that is forbidden. I just recognize it as a card. It has a flip effect that destroys all monsters on the field, and both players reveal the top 5 cards of their deck, then special summon all revealed level 4 or lower monsters and face up attack or face down defense position. Also, any remaining cards in their hands get added, which that is just a lot of things, certainly, for one card to do. Particularly, I think you would immediately get rid of the face down defense positions, because this creates a scenario that you could have a Cyber Jar that would then place another Cyber Jar, or 2 more Cyber Jars doing the same thing, drawing potentially 15 cards out of a deck and having people run out. And clearly this is an effect that happened in anime, and that they are just copying what happened in anime. But yeah, it would be pretty easy to have a Cyber Jar version 2.0 that even makes sense with it being a cyber thing that just destroyed all monsters on the field. And maybe you didn't have some echoes of draw 1 card from the top of their deck and summon it in face up attack or face up defense position. I don't think face up defense position was really a thought when Cyber Jar was made, and it was added, I think, probably later in the smart ad there. And maybe you would think about if they draw one card and it's not a monster, that card goes to the hand, or maybe you set it so that it goes to the graveyard. Like, you could definitely nerf this, certainly. Destroy all monsters on the field is fine for a flip effect. Drawing 5 cards is too many. It could be draw 2 cards and then face up attack or defense and then add to the hand. Because if you were to bring this back, and there very possibly is a card that does something like that already, if you were to bring this back, you'd want to make it so you could have 3 copies of it, and then 3 copies potentially would be the equivalent of 1 version of this. But the change text is definitely weird. Speaking of weird, for the accountability section, like, I am working my way through finishing or I thought finishing, really, as much as I could, the Nintendo Switch game Link's Awakening. I ran into some other problems, certainly, as I was trying to find the last bits of collectibles in the game. It is a very rough game as far as just not being logically consistent, and I don't mean by the overarching story of the entire game being a dream. That is fine as an overarching thing. What's inconsistent, though, is that there will just be some random seashell or random heart piece that is sunken at the bottom of the water. And in the original version of the game, or at least the DS version of the game, where the graphics are probably very similar to the original version that would have been black and white, you can't see through the water like you can in the new version of the game. So there's no way, without a guide, that you would have ever been able to find all the components. There is also amiibo support, so certain amiibos will give chamber stones for the custom dungeon making feature that they added. Plus, there are chamber stones at the storefront. There's like 14 chamber stones in total you can collect, which is an odd number in the first place, but the vast majority of them, about 8 I would say, well, at least 4 are in the shop for a massively ridiculously high price of 12,080 rupees. And there's just no way you'd play the game and have that many rupees, even if you had done the extra dungeon things. The only way you would have had that many rupees is you would have had to play the extra dungeons multiple times, and I'm not even sure if you did do it multiple times, would you have gotten a reward there, because if you do the gold level extra dungeons in the Dompe's Shack dungeon making minigame, he'll give you 300 rupees. So you would have had to have done the extra dungeon like 4 times for every new chamber stone, or you just do the normal thing where you did the smarter thing, which is save your file, and just outside of the shack, or after you had stolen a chamber stone from inside the shop, which it's pretty difficult to get the pixel accuracy to sneak your way out of the shop and steal an item, and it causes you to be called thief for the rest of the game, and when you go back in the shack you die because the shopkeeper kills you, but then you hit retry, and you'll load up the previous save file, and you'll still have the item and be able to go back in the shack and steal the next chamber stone. That all being said, because you're killed and hit retry, there's an internal metric that they don't show to you about how many deaths you have, and you only get the perfect ending, which is really just a picture, a slightly different ending at the very end of the credits, where you see a picture of the female sort of love interest in Link's Awakening. You really only have like 5 conversations with this girl, so it's not really that much of a love interest, which makes sense because it's a dream and she's a made-up dream character, so having her as a love interest doesn't make a lot of sense. The way the ending plays out, which it's very interesting to see how inconsistent the animation is at the intro cutscene and the outro cutscene of Link's Awakening, because that's basically a Studio Ghibli-esque flat 2D animation showing Link as you would have expected to see Link in like a cartoon of the time, or what he would have looked like in the NES games, and then the new remastered graphics of Link in the actual game being this short little chibi Link with rounded cell shaded graphics that looks more like he looks more like a Goomba than anything else, is as far as 3D modeled and cartoonified. But yeah, there's a fishing mini game that takes too long to try to get everything. There's a river raft mini game that takes too long to try and get everything. And then there's a crane mini game that takes too long to get everything. And what's funny is the crane mini game in particular only rewards you with a chamber stone after you've beaten the game and collected all of the little statues and 3D models of things. Where it would have made a lot more sense for the crane mini game to let you look at the 3D models of each of the characters in the game as kind of just a basic 3D model viewer or art gallery. It's a fairly short game, and it's probably for the better, because the game is kind of confused compared to a more modern Zelda game. Like, you go into one dungeon and there's a dungeon all about falling down holes. The problem is you've spent at least 4 or 5 dungeons before that learning that if you fall down a hole you just take damage and respawn. So the rules just totally change in that one dungeon, and that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't get explained. The dungeon crafting minigame is not great. It has one major flaw in which you can't program it or tell it where the stairs connect. So very often you'll have to use multiple sets of stairs, one in, one out, and it will just automatically decide to put the in and out into the same chamber or group of chambers, so that you can't actually get in or out of that group of chamber. And there's no way to change it at all. You just have to kind of waste a bunch of time arranging things. And there's no art really in it, because you can't make your own chambers in the sense that you could program new things, place new characters in specific spots, put doors in specific spots, stairs in specific spots, pots in specific spots, change the floor patterns, change the wall pattern textures. It is definitely not anywhere close to like Mario Maker 2 level of design, which is really what you would have wanted there, and maybe that would have had to have been its own separate game. Link's Awakening, this remake, really was just handed off from the looks of the credits to a third-party company. So, and at a certain level, that may just be what Nintendo needs to do in general, is just hand off all of its old games, and like Game Boy games in particular, and just have them remade by third-party companies, so that they just can bring back Game Boy games in particular, of the few good Game Boy games. But they didn't really break out of the mold that much, because you could have certainly told that story with all new dungeon levels. I don't think any of the dungeon levels are any different, with real tweaks to more modern gameplay. A new overworld. I suppose there is a possibility that you could make a Link's Awakening 2 and make a sequel. But I don't think Nintendo would really let them do that. The timelines I had to look up just to begin to understand it, the different Links and different Zeldas throughout the world, and as I kind of understood it, there was multiple Links and multiple Zeldas, but the website I looked at seemed to really imply that there is actually only one Link and one Zelda, for the most part, and it is instead a case where Ocarina of Time created a branch in timelines, and then it created a second branch in timelines, and a different split, and everything else is linear after those branches. The real problem is when you start getting into the Game Boy games like Spirit Tracks or the Oracles games, of which there were 2 Oracles games, like Pokemon Red and Blue. Those games have to be explained somehow, and then like there's weirdness certainly around like the Minish Cap and Majora's Mask, as that is supposed to be one of the timelines. I think that they're not particularly interested in visiting again. Inevitably, even looking at Link's Awakening as the first game, they established this idea, and maybe this is just Nintendo in a nutshell, is that they have this long-running idea in which they just don't really care about maintaining their properties in any consistent way. So they're perfectly fine with Super Mario Bros. 2 in the West just being a reskin of Doki Doki Panic. They're perfectly fine with having an entire game that is just a dream and that is weird, and that they've just handed off to another person because Shigeru Miyamoto just didn't want to be involved in it, or I don't know if Shigeru Miyamoto was involved with any Zelda things. They're perfectly fine with not caring about Zelda, Metroid, and Samus Aran after Super Metroid, and and really handing off. There are more Metroid games handed off to third-party developers that they don't really care about than there are mainline Metroid games that they did care about. And I suppose there's a level of consistency during that time frame where that would have been the case for most game developers. I don't think Sonic 1, 2, 3 Spinball really feels like it has to be that connected in a storyline. Most of the story, remember, in NES games would have been just written after the fact for the manual. But yeah, now from the modern perspective, it would be really nice if the Zelda series pretty much just locked down the whole timeline stuff and started to reboot some of the stuff. I don't know what you do with the original Zelda game though. Like, you probably just emulate it. You can certainly do like Link's Awakening and reskin it and make it look nicer, but it's still going to play very roughly. The A and B only buttons controls are going to immediately show their age. If anything, I think you probably take the overworld maps of 1 and 2 of Zelda and remaster those graphics and redo the dungeons. So you would start with the general layout, and then you would probably add a whole bunch of new features, like the ability to jump, for instance, and then you would add new dungeon puzzles and reasons to limit those sections. And so previous world maps should just be like homages to the original world. And taking just Zelda 1 and 2's overworld map is probably not even that useful. You probably would want to take homages for all of that and add it to the outskirts of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. And that'd be about as much as I think you can do. Or you just make a collection. You remaster the graphics, you put Zelda 1 and 2 and 3 all in one game. Anyways, that's pretty much the accountability section for today, as I'm slowly wrapping up on that. After that, I have just New Super Mario Bros. U, which will be kind of a game that I think I'll play off and on, and then Pokemon Snap, which is a game that I'll probably be more focused on. What I didn't do, obviously, since I've not mentioned it, is play LEGO Worlds, and I definitely am feeling very demotivated as far as actually wanting to play that game. So I could have battled that. I need to jump back into LEGO Worlds and wrap that up. I need to put my computer through the paces just to make sure it's not going to have any other problems and weird resets or anything like that. And so I need to start playing a different game and finish LEGO Worlds. It's difficult to just jump to a different game, because if I jump to a different game, I'll probably never get back to LEGO Worlds, and my videos would be out of order. But yeah, I didn't play any of that, and that's a problem. Also, it's a problem having like right now my throat and my voice is not really that worn out, and playing Nintendo games and not talking would have been a great time to let my voice rest. But now is not really the time in which I need to do that. and it's killing my back. Just lying in bed, slightly elevated, is not giving me the level of back support I probably need. So I would have thought that that would have helped compared to sitting in upright in the recliner and having the back support there, but it isn't. So like, I really woke up today with just an awful back pain, so I'm gonna have to be careful about that too. I may simply just have to sit in the recliner and sit upright, which would make sense and be easy enough to do while playing the game. But I don't think there's any way to make any footage there. Like, if I was sitting up in the chair and had the microphone on, it was just recording, and it was just the audio only commentary, like, I don't think that's interesting footage at all. There would be problems certainly with the audio. I would have the audio playing out via a best case scenario. I could set up Bluetooth headphones and have Bluetooth headphones playing directly into my ears, and then none of the Nintendo Switch audio would be caught in the microphone, and then there could be no Content ID copyright claim there. But just having like having Nintendo Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening in the title would probably get automatic Content ID claims or copyright claims. Having a single picture, even as a thumbnail, would get Content ID claims and copyright claims. So it would be this weird audio-only journey where you would just be watching either my logo or something else play as I talk, and I could try and fancy that up a little bit, certainly, but I don't know if there's a lot of fancyifying that can happen. And certainly I could have probably said quite a bit about Link's Awakening while playing it, but then there also would have definitely been points where it wouldn't have had much to say, and without the visual representation on the screen, I would feel the need to just describe what is happening, because unlike a movie director's commentary, which can be fully audio, I have to explain what I'm doing also, which would definitely change the experience. I guess you want to always chain if you can. The odds of somebody being able to chain on top of chaining to cancel something, I think, are probably a little lower. So yeah, I guess that is something I'll think about, is that if I am going to end up spending a ton of time, I think I probably want to keep it down to, at maximum, one Nintendo Switch game a month. Just so I know I'm making other content, but even one a month is too much. I also went through the Nintendo eShop as far as free games. There are technically 89 free games on the eShop, and the vast majority of them are either not worth looking at or they're straight up lies. For instance, Pac-Man 99, Tetris 99, direct Nintendo products there, to my understanding. Both require the online service, so they're only free if you also are paying for the online service, which is the online service with its expansion pass, is the only thing that I think is actually of any real value on the eShop, and frankly should be free, because the Nintendo Switch, without buying other games, really has very little value. It's still incredibly shocking that there isn't a demo installed by default on the game, even if it is just a simple demo like 1-2 Switch, or even simpler than that, to learn to use the controls. I was kind of shocked to find out that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel is available on the Switch, but the controls, at least using a controller, are pretty bad, poorly programmed as far as what does what. You'd think the left stick would move the selector around, but no, it's the actual D-pad that moves the selectors around, and the left stick scrolls at most, which means you barely ever use it. And you'd kind of think that that would be programmed by default so that both would do both, unless somebody actively changes their programming. But yeah, Master Duel does not run smoothly and well, at least docked, and you would assume that docked is when things would run smoothly, but I guess not, because when it's docked it is going for a higher resolution. So it might very well be the case that if you're running into any problems running a game docked, you should probably just turn down the resolution on the screen and push it down to 720p instead of 1080p. There's Pokemon Home, which does not work with Pokemon Snap. I guess you don't actually catch the Pokemon in Pokemon Snap, so that makes some sense, which is free. There's Pokemon Unite, which is full of microtransactions, and it just doesn't seem like there's a way you could get the premium currency ever so there's no way to really stay free to play. There is another Pokemon game. Pokemon Unite looks very interesting, and it does seem like the world in which Pokemon Unite happens is probably somewhere in more of an African country, because that's the only Pokemon game I've seen that has like cornrows as a hairstyle and a main character that distinctly looks like they have dark colored skin, where it's been a long reigning complaint and a growing complaint, and I think a pretty valid growing complaint at this point, that the mainline Pokemon games don't let you make a kid that is anything other than Asian looking or white looking. But in all fairness, Pokemon has been just incredibly awful about even letting you pick between being a boy and girl. Sword and Shield, like, being a great example of that. Pokemon TV is interesting because it lets you watch some of the newest series of the Pokemon cartoon and some of the first series of the Pokemon cartoon, which is a lot of Pokemon, but then oddly it also has like really early age Pokemon content, like Pokemon sing-along type stuff, and then also Pokemon the Trading Card Esports Championship live streams. And that just seems like there should be separate versions of the same app in that case, or some way to lock people into a specific thing, because the whole idea of Pokemon TV that makes it have any value is that you don't potentially want to just install the YouTube app and have have kids just watching YouTube randomly, which YouTube is still pretty awful, not signed in as far as trying to show pretty awful Five Nights at Freddy's garbage YouTube videos to kids. But yeah, with the Pokemon TV app, you would want to say, I want you to only see the very early age stuff, or the very early age stuff, and the cartoon anime, or just the esports stuff. Like, esports people have a long history of doing inappropriate things and saying inappropriate things, and just being young and not sportsmanlike. So even if these are edited pre-recordings of the card game, there's a very good reason to not want your kid to play the Pokemon trading card game in general, since it kind of encourages gambling. My network was also having trouble in the middle of the night last night, which I hope that's just people working on it, or nothing big, but yeah. If anything, I would still lean towards believing that the occasional network mess up here is just Konami servers being throttled. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see a lot of websites having trouble in general, just because of like Ukraine and all of that. Let's see. There are 3 or 4 demos of pinball games that you can check out that let you play maybe 1 or 2 tables. Although I think the Zakaria pinball demo actually lets you, in one way or another, try out a lot more tables. But the Stern Pinball Arcade is a demo not really worth having, because you should just have Pinball Arcade in general. It's basically the same table that you get for free. It's Frankenstein, which is not a very good table for a Stern Pinball Arcade or Pinball Arcade. Pinball FX3 is did that card just flip and then go back down? I think it did. Pinball FX3 is better because it gives you Fishtails and Sorcerer their own custom table. I think it's Sorcerer. So you get 2 tables there, and Fishtails is a better table than Frankenstein is. Neither one of them are expected to run particularly well or smoothly on the Nintendo Switch, though. And like, just, it's so obvious that everything is better on a PC, and obviously it would be. Spending $1,200 to $2,000 and $1,000 to $2,000 on a PC should give you a better experience, and getting things on Steam is just so much a better experience than potentially buying things on the Nintendo Switch eShop. So personally, for me, also with no real need for portability, there's very little reason to even own a Switch other than to play the official Nintendo games. Yep, this one is literally just going back down. So you'd have to go to like the history of what this card is. Set this card face down instead of sending it to the graveyard. Scrap Iron Scarecrow. But if that does anything, that's just buying me time, which is fine. let's see, was there was this other Pokemon game that was blocky and looked like Minecraft. That was more of an auto game, which is funny because I thought Pokemon Unite played itself and was more of an auto game. But actually you control the Pokemon in Pokemon Unite, which I'm kind of shocked by. I didn't realize that's how it played. Pokemon Unite also looks way better than the blocky game. There's a Pokemon Cafe remix that can only be played with the touchscreen, so I haven't undocked the Switch to try that out. Rocket League is free to play. It doesn't run, I think, particularly smoothly, and frankly, I think the game just kind of sucks as a concept. Like, soccer with cars, I think, is a concept that makes sense for a very brief amount of time and doesn't. The to-play Rocket League also is a major download and requires you to log in with an Epic account. Fortnite, I believe, is also on the Switch. I have no interest in playing Fortnite. But when I installed about 10, and by the time I had gone through each of them and looked at them, I was down to probably 4 free games, and I was having network trouble after that point, so I had no desire or no way to look at like games that might actually be worth buying. But I don't think there really will be any. There are clearly some games that Nintendo has made for cell phones, like Super Mario Run, that should have been able to been ported really quickly and easily to the Switch and yet weren't, which seems a little weird. Clearly the Switch was designed to potentially be able to play any kind of cell phone game, but they've failed to really use that as an idea. And you really can't get rid of the touchscreen, or at least the touchpad. You could go from a touchscreen to a touchpad, certainly, I guess. But if anything, I would imagine next major improvement of the PlayStation or the Xbox should have some kind of small touchscreen enabled in it. If for just typing and nothing else. But that is really the only thing I think most games will use it for. There's clearly a difference between a Joy-Con game or a game designed to use any kind of controller and then a touchscreen game, and the two will just never cross over. Because it is a matter of where do you want to put your eyes? Do you want to put it down to a screen, or do you want to put your eyes up to a TV? A dual screen concept is something that they thought about on the Wii U and failed miserably. Yeah, I guess there's nothing else to really say. I've been rambling. One of the things I want to mention about Twitter is Twitter has twice now put in special advertisements for hashtag Ukraine, and that's all good and well if you want to actually engage with that and read that, but it also highlights a problem in which if you were coming to Twitter for a very different reason, which I am, like, it sucks that they're shoving it in the front of your face. Like, I'm coming to Twitter for video game news. I don't want to think of Twitter as my news source, because it's a terrible news source. Even if I was following general news Twitter things, I still wouldn't want Twitter as a company to decide that they're going to be they're going to push me to just watching hashtags of random things being tweeted about. The vast majority won't be first party accounts or in any way like verifiable accounts. We already have far too much of a problem in which mainstream news, not just like real mainstream news, not video game journalism, takes too much of their news from sources that are just unsighted random people on Twitter, instead of doing the actual investigative journalism that they should be doing and verifying their sources to at least a small amount. I suppose Twitter's at least has the feel of not being as bad as Facebook, where Facebook seems to allow rampant propaganda and lies and fake news, for lack of a better term, posted, and often that is rampant garbage being retweeted by your friends or family, depending on who your friends or family are. But yeah, Twitter's not really any better than Facebook in that aspect. There's no curation, no verification, no citing sources or verifying sources. Twitter shouldn't probably be the arbitrator of truth, but they also shouldn't be trying to highlight what they think is truth, or just highlight anything. They should be a very topic neutral site. And so that's slightly annoying. Facebook, I will say, is a little bit better on that. At least when Susan Wojcicki says YouTube supports us, it is fairly obvious what she means is she and the employees at YouTube themselves support things. Although YouTube then very sneakily uses their algorithm and their own power to pick winners and losers as far as who succeeds on YouTube and whose videos get seen. So, while instead of YouTube saying we support Ukraine, they almost certainly are just allowing pro-Ukraine videos to be seen a lot more than pro-Russian videos, which they'll probably taking down a lot of those. Whereas in previous cases, YouTube has had specific rules about people talking about hot topic issues, and they have specifically said that like websites like CNN can put up videos on their channels talking about something like Ukraine, but they're going to silence small YouTube creators talking about the same subject. That was very much the rule that they implemented with big events, big tragedies. Mostly they were leaning towards mass shootings and things like that, where people were getting on the instant something was reported and talking about it and having really no insight or no knowledge, and just reporting on things randomly to get views. But they've been particularly silent in this case. So you could either take that as possibly YouTube finally learning to not be so stringent in its enforcement of its arbitrary rules, or you can take it as they don't care in this instance as much as they would care about something else. We'll have to see what happens next time there's like a major school shooting or a major story that YouTube doesn't want propagated. Yep. I'll also say, ever since I've silenced G4 TV, I've seen a lot more X-Play tweets, but that might very well just be the case that the X-Play Twitter account was particularly silent, and now they've decided to stop being so silent because they've split up the G4 YouTube channel and renamed it X-Play, and they're making separate YouTube channels for X-Play and Attack of the Show. And I think the G4 TV second channel will have Attack of the Show and everything else, but X-Play is going to be its own separate thing. I think that's what they said they were going to do. Regardless, it probably is still going to be a case that I'm going to have to mute X-Play on Twitter also. That's more than enough, though, as far as talking about Twitter. Second Dinner has the same open position or another open position for universal user experience, user design open, so they're still trying to hire for that. We can see now that they have the 2022 copyright of Marvel at the bottom, so they are now making it a very obvious here. They're partnering with Marvel in the first game. They're working on a prototype, and we think it might be the most fun thing ever in history. So this isn't particularly new news so much, but it does, I think, point to the fact that they are moving forward. Yeah. See, they're looking for a senior project manager, an associate user experience, user interface designer, and a regular user interface, user experience designer. Which, what does that really mean? It means that one of the user interface, user experience designer is also going to be considered a manager of the associate level employees. Which is a little weird, because that's wearing two hats for sure. As far as you're going to have somebody under you. It's not incredibly weird, I would say, though, because you would want one specific user interface, and so there needs to be some kind of person in charge at that level. That was a big sacrifice there. Personally, I am definitely getting the feeling that Second Dinner is taking too much time to get towards a beginning of a first product. By this point, I would have hoped that they would have been a lot closer to releasing the Marvel card game. I would have hoped that we would have been yeah, I'd hoped that we would have been targeting a mid 2022 to late 2022 release, and I'm questioning whether we will even see this Marvel card game. Yeah, at all by 2023. I question if it will just be kind of trapped in a development hell. I should have seen that coming. Here's a YouTube creators poll. How are you feeling at this point in 2022? 53.2% saying exhausted. There's something YouTube tweeted out here that was interesting as far as how to create a YouTube channel and customize it, which I guess technically you do have to constantly update and put out this kind of YouTube creators info, but it is also so late to the party to potentially want any new YouTube content creator to even bother to try to make a new channel or start to be a content creator. The Creators on the Rise program was a step in the right direction, certainly, but it kind of feels like there needs to be major algorithm changes. I can definitely tell you how the YouTube algorithm just does not work well at all for me, as I want to see new things from new creators in similar veins to some of the videos I've already watched, and the algorithm cannot figure that out at all. It just says, oh, you've watched this? How about you watch it again? Oh, you've watched this? How about you watch this again? It's like maybe 95% videos that already have been watched, and there's no way to say, hey, quit suggesting that. Suggest one rerun a day or per hour. Like, don't have the entire feed be all reruns. Don't make me scroll down further and further and further just to be increasingly disappointed in you suggesting reruns and nothing else. I have on several occasions been able to scroll down the suggested videos to the point where they are just saying, do you want to watch Jamie Oliver? Do you want to watch this music video? And I'm like, no, I've never watched a Jamie Oliver video. I've never watched a music video on YouTube. Why are you even suggesting this? Like, this is nowhere close to anything that would be an acceptable suggestion. It's just like, here's something that's really popular. Our algorithm is broken. Almost certainly what it's doing as far as a recommendation algorithm is it makes mesh networks of the biggest videos to make recommendations, and then it runs out of space and it drops any of the smaller mesh networks with the least amount of views. So it will potentially, it even makes these mesh networks, these spider webs of connections for very small videos like mine, and then just drops them when it runs out of space. I would fully believe that that's the case. Or even if it keeps them, it's effectively never using them. Moving on, BioWare has a lot of jobs listed here, so we definitely could see that BioWare is staffing up. Although, in a lot of ways, you could also tell that this is an example of BioWare losing a large amount of its staff. So they're saying, do you want to be part of the next Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Star Wars, The Old Republic game? sure, you might be involved, but you also might be fired after the fact once those games fail, inevitably, because the people that are actually working there are not the people that made those games originally good. So that is weirdly the things. Suppose it's not even really worth reporting on what the former person in charge of YouTube gaming is doing, so I'm going to just mute him as a person. Like, he has this new Polygon Studios, but I'm not sure Polygon Studios is even a video game studio. It says facilitating a hotbed of digital culture is how they describe themselves on their Twitter. So that doesn't even sound like a video game company. Still getting these normal cards and getting quick disconnects, so I appreciate that. But even getting quick disconnects, you still basically have to get 3 quick disconnects in a row. The USA put out this weird "we respect intellectual property" copyright statement, almost as if they were legally required to put that out, or if they were like if the ESA, the lobbyist group themselves, somehow had gotten in trouble for stealing the IP of a video game or some other person. It is funny how it always is "we respect intellectual property," because inevitably when you talk about respect, does any company ever respect a consumer on any level at all? Like, the answer is almost always no. Does any company on any level actually respect intellectual property when it is some small creator? The answer is almost always no. That they'll get their lawyers to get you to sign something over for a song and a dance, or they'll just straight up steal your idea and then try and make you litigate it in court. The idea of copyright, well, inherently is an idea that I just do not believe in at all. And an idea that I just don't think has been around long enough or proven itself to actually be successful or helpful to society in the time it has been around. It would be a little bit less objectionable, certainly, though, if copyright was implemented in a fair nature, for every creator equally, but that's certainly not the case. And I definitely do get the feeling that there is a future scenario where you could simply have severe limitations on what copyright is and what can be copyrighted, and still protect from the flamboyant theft that was happening. Like, copyright makes sense when somebody is spending years writing a novel, and then there's potentially somebody that's just going to whole cloth copy the novel and sell it, and some printer company is just straight up stealing. It makes sense for a copyright to protect against that. Although at a certain point that should that could have been protected under just general fraud and limitations as far as printing. But it makes a lot less sense when the concept of abandonware is really considered. And the concept of abandonware is never talked about when they talk about copyright, or the just general concept of who owns the copyright, whether it's a corporation or it's 70 years plus past the death of the original creator. Suffice it to say here, nothing special is going to be said on this. This is just a lobbyist group. I will say ESA's website seems to look different here, because I got rid of a bunch of these things with the ad blocker, and they seem to be back now. So maybe they're just redoing their website. Nintendo is one of the major companies that sits on the board of the ESA, so almost certainly a statement like this comes from Nintendo more than anybody else. Moving on, according to Video Games Chronicles, the Kirby 30th anniversary concert has been announced. Sounds interesting, although not really to me. Actually, sounds quite dull. I don't even know if there's that many songs in Kirby that are that good. I know there's that song that goes Kirby, Kirby, Kirby from like the cartoon, but I think that's pretty much it. Let's see. At-release GTA Online players who transferred to PC can't migrate to the PS5 or Xbox Series X. I think we'd already talked about that. The Xbox Cloud Gaming makes a major performance improvements for iOS. Which, okay. What really sucks is when you look at like a controller like this on the side of a cell phone, even these controllers look better. There is definitely weirdness in my mind around the button placement of the Nintendo Switch and the Joy-Cons in general. Like the left triggers versus the Z left and Z right. I'm almost always going to want to press the Z left and Z right instead of the left bump and right bump, which they call L and R. Like when you're connecting the controllers, it says push L and R, and every single time I push ZL and ZR and it still worked, which is typical for video games, is that you can often just push the wrong button and it will still work. But then the X and Y positions and A and B positions are definitely still in that Japanese reversed style. And I don't really appreciate that because it causes confusion in my mind. And there is a battery pack thing that you can get officially from Nintendo to add AA's to the Joy-Cons to make them a bit thicker and easier to hold. I still don't think they'd be particularly great to hold compared to the plastic grip that just comes with it. And it's way cheaper still to just get the 8-bit adapter and use an Xbox One controller instead. And that is definitely my plan. Uh, Video Games Chronicle says a new EA patent is designed to make its servers more reliable. I guess that's good. A lot of these articles, certainly we just need to look at the headlines. The Xbox Game Passes have seemingly released and then edited. Microsoft has confirmed all 8 titles. So it's F1 2021, Dungeon of Whatever, Gnarlowback, Tainted Grail Conquest, Weird West, Shredder, Zero Escape, the Nonary Games, and Norco. That is weird, I would say, that the Zero Escape visual novel games is free. The Nonary Games would be the first 2 in the series, not the Zero Time Dilemma games. So of the games that exist here, a lot of these I've never heard of, and we know one is a weird Japanese visual novel experience. Weird West and F1 are about the only ones that begin to even make sense. It does certainly make a lot of sense maybe not to start with something like the Nonary Games, which is a pretty big title visual novel, but it would make a lot of sense to every month have at least one visual novel come out. Although arguably, if you're going to have one visual novel come out, the vast majority of them are going to be anime schoolgirl visual novels, and maybe they probably don't want to touch that or include that. There's not in the characters, as far as the Nonary Games, really in an anime schoolgirl. There's a schoolgirl character, but she's not drawn in that art style of moe. She's not in a school outfit. She's not overly sexualized. Instead, in fact, they more emphasize a MILF character, I would say. Older characters who are more scantily clad and kind of ridiculously scantily clad in the Nonary Games. So yeah, I don't know how you fix that as an idea, but it certainly is an idea. Because I imagine on the Xbox shop there's plenty of visual novels that are coming over. At least a few. It probably also highlights the idea of Microsoft getting a little bit more serious, as they seem to constantly try to get a little bit more serious about the Japanese Asian markets. So maybe we'll start to see some kind of visual novel game come out, or some kind of more Japanese style game coming out every month. Although I also wouldn't be surprised if Japanese visual novel developers don't want to be on Game Pass because they think their games are worth more than that. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the Xbox Series X and S's direct storage tech is now available for PC game. This feature allows for faster loading and more detailed worlds. I don't know if there's anything specific actually around direct storage other than it is just a concept like DirectX, in which there's a better API as far as which allows it to work better. Here, Microsoft recommending players upgrade to Windows 11, as though although direct storage is compatible with Windows 10, Windows 11 has the latest storage optimizations built in and is recommended path for gaming. Which, yeah, they're going to say that certainly to push people. I wouldn't be surprised if there's very few games that actually you see any improvement on using direct storage. Because there's going to potentially be a desire for parity with any other operating system your game might support, but if your game only supports Windows, maybe you do direct storage then. Maybe direct storage will just get built into Unity and Unreal Engine. It seems like, as I skim that article, that direct storage might allow things to go directly from an SSD to the GPU without going through the CPU as much, which that might speed things up a little bit, but I don't know by much. I think my third monitor is blinking every now and then, which might be an indication of my computer still having trouble, but it might be that I'm just kind of seeing things out of the corner of my eye. And certainly it does blink a little bit on the preview window, so there is blinking that's happening. But there's a difference between the full screen blinking and just seeing a little bit of a blink out of the corner of my eye, so I'll have to keep an eye on that. Moving on, Ghostwire Tokyo has 6 different graphical settings on the PS5, which is definitely 4 too many. They're overly complicating things. There's a quality mode, a performance mode, a high frame rate quality, a high frame rate performance, and a high frame rate quality VSync or high frame rate performance VSync, which technically, yeah, you could just have a checkbox for VSync and VSync, and then you would just have a quality mode and a performance mode. But yeah, they should probably make up their mind as far as how they expect the game to really be played. Even the quality and performance modes is really too much. Like, that is stuff that console players don't want to see. That was one of the selling points specifically about consoles, is that it would just work. And now you have scenarios where nobody is going to do the testing to play a game in 6 different visual modes to verify that it works perfectly with very little bugs and crashes or visual glitches. We're stuttering. Let's see, moving on. The Video Games Chronicle says the Xbox Series X outsold the PlayStation 5 in Europe for the first time last month. That's quite surprising considering the shortages of the PS5. The Dino Crisis producer confirms he is, quote, deeply involved in Exoprimal. So, this is a spiritual successor, at least somewhat, to Dino Crisis. Although, I would have to do some more research to know how Dino Crisis really played, because Exoprimal definitely feels like it is almost like a Left 4 Dead game where you have mechs shooting random groups of dinosaurs instead of zombies, which that is probably not how Dino Crisis worked. Video Game Chronicle says insiders have described a Fast and Furious, which that phrase has just been ruined by the movie series exits from the Xbox Perfect Dark studio. As much as half of the core development team have quit in the past year, Initiative management says it's confidential in its team. It's confident in its team. It is definitely possible that Microsoft's hands-off approach did not particularly apply to the team making Perfect Dark, or it did apply and then that just left the bad person in charge. So you can see here they've just listed everybody that worked and where they worked before. So this could be a case where Gallagher here, McQueenie, or Dixon Lee. It would almost have to be Gallagher since he's the studio head. Is just a bad studio head. Meanwhile, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 departures as far as designers, 2 departures as far as writers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 programmers, 2 producers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about 11 pictures. You certainly don't have new hires here, and I wouldn't be surprised if these new hires are actually in this list already. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have left, and that definitely gives the impression that it's a management issue one way or the other. So I would definitely say look to the Perfect Dark company, because if Microsoft, if Larry Herb, Major Nelson can't come in and right the ship on the Perfect Dark company, then why would you believe he could right the ship on Activision Blizzard as far as a much bigger company? Let's see. Here we have a quote. One person said, "Making games is hard enough, let alone when you feel like you can't get through to the people making the decisions that affect everyone." The culture issue was partly behind the decision to bring on board Crystal Dynamics, as claimed, with Gallagher and Nuremberg allegedly hoping that production would move more smoothly with the introduction of a second team familiar with their methods. So yeah, it definitely feels like the management didn't appreciate their current staff and really was hoping to replace them. But at a certain level, your staff is your staff, and inevitably it feels like there's too many of these cases that happen in any kind of job, but particularly in video game development, where there are managers that say, "Oh, my employees suck, and I wish I could just get rid of them and replace them all." But yeah, you hear that from bosses all over the place, and that is the cry of a bad boss, obviously, is that when they say, "I can't get my employees to work." Like, if you're a boss and you have one problem employee, then you have one problem of employee. If all your employees are problems, then you're the problem. Because that's just how averages are going to work. You have to say the average employee we have here is the average employee we have here. Like, Like, you gotta live within those bounds. Moving on, Monster Hunter Rise's Sunbreak expansion has been dated with a new trailer. If you're interested in that, check it out. It's coming out June 30th, 2022. Yeah, been Exodiad. I didn't even see that coming that time. Let's see, Zelda's Ocarina of Time in development PC port is already getting mods, high-res textures, widescreen support, and Link versus Link fights are also being tested. That is one of the things that's kind of annoying about Link's Awakening on the Switch, is that you have to have the Link amiibo, or find a way to write the Link amiibo's QR NFC tag to something to unlock a Shadow Link chamber stone that you could use to make your own dungeons. Not that it really matters, because making your own dungeons still is not particularly wild enough, or there's just not enough options for it to be interesting. You definitely could have made a Zelda Maker game, though. I have to emphasize that. If the people who made Mario Maker 2 jumped over to immediately developing a Zelda Maker game where you made just dungeons and could place every element, there's definitely a game there as a concept, and there's even a Metroid Maker concept. At the very least, they should have announced that. Even if it never got developed, it's something to say, hey, yes, we've greenlit this project. Anyways, talking about Ocarina of Time mods. Well, as much as Skyrim is loved, I could definitely see a case where Ocarina of Time mods might put a whole lot of life into playing Ocarina of Time for the 20th time for some people. Let's see. I don't know if there's a lot, though, that a mod would do. I mean, in general, you might have a mod that gives you something, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a lot. You could have a mod that gives you new dungeons and things like that. Just a new game plus, or custom new game plus. You can have mods that maybe make things a little bit easier. Yeah, Link's Awakening has a new version in which the game would have been more difficult and you would have taken twice as much damage. I don't see any reason why you would have wanted to play that way, though. Like, there's nothing about the game that gets improved by you dying more often. Particularly since you're gonna die pretty randomly unless you're playing very carefully. Yeah, a randomizer mod is about the only thing I think you would want in Ocarina of Time, is just random locations for random items. And that might be somewhat fun, but it might also be annoying for most players. New dungeon mods would be... new dungeon layout mods would be probably the only thing that would be slightly interesting. But when you get into Ocarina of Time, those dungeons are not square chambers anymore. They are 3D open world rooms. So connecting those one by one would be very difficult. Where a Metroid Maker game recreating Metroid or Super Metroid is still square chambers. Even Metroid Dread is still square chambers. That'd be very easy to make a Maker game after that. I don't know if there's too many other Maker games you can make, but you could certainly use the line. You could make a Punch-Out Maker like demo game, something for $1.99, where it's just Punch Out, but you can name random characters and give them specific stats as far as do they punch, do they favor a left jab or right jab, an uppercut, do they have a combo. Like, you could make something like that, certainly. And that might even breathe some life into Punch-Out, whereas it's a lot harder to make a new Punch-Out game otherwise. A Golf Maker game, certainly. Mario Golf Maker would work. Because if you were to make different greens, different fields, that would work very well. I need to hurry up. I still definitely am having a problem of waking up in weird times and not having enough time. I'm almost wondering if I shouldn't try to stream later in the evening, because the later in the evening streams, we're actually getting people's views. If I could just consistently be consistent on it, that would be the real issue. But yeah, if I started streaming somewhere around 3 or 4 consistently, and then I woke up early, that would be fine. If I woke up just at 3 or 4 in the evening, that would be fine. But of course, consistency is the thing, and insomnia never really lets me be consistent. Moving on, here's the launch trailer for GTA 5 on PS5 and Xbox Series. I don't know if there really needs to be a new launch trailer for an old game. Alright. Let's see if this works. Moving on, let's see, Resident Evil 2, 3, and 7 saves will transfer over to the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S versions. DLC that comes with the Resident Evil 7 Gold Edition will carry over too, which seems like an odd way of saying that it's just forward compatible. But I guess maybe it's not, because it's being a little obtuse as far as you're gonna get these upgraded versions for free. It says free for existing owners, but maybe not free forever. there really is such a little difference between the current gen and the next gen and the previous gen of consoles that this should just be built into the rules that, and I feel like next generation of consoles almost certainly should say we're going to guarantee forward compatibility for the next generation of consoles always, for all games, and just admit that there will always be a major upgrade and then a minor upgrade as far as games that come out, game consoles that come out. Video Games Chronicle says Square Enix has donated $500,000 to the Ukraine relief effort. This Ukrainian flag is very generic in its colors, I have to say. They probably should have done some slightly better job of putting some symbology into its flags. Right, let's see if this works. Special summon this, sacrificing that. I'm getting fairly bored with playing this same deck. I really wish I could play something else that would even have a chance of winning. But that is the problem with certainly trying to go up in the ranks with any consistency, is that you end up playing the same decks over and over again, or the same one deck. EA is hosting EA isn't hosting its traditional EA Play Live event this year. What's interesting here is I thought for a second my screen was broken because of this picture in this line here, but I'm like, what the heck just happened? Did my screen decide to break? I wouldn't be super surprised if my monitor did decide to break. I've had my main TV for, well, at least 8 or 9 years, so wouldn't be super surprising if it decided to honk out on me. Although at a certain point I also have like 2 or 3 TVs. I have like 2 TVs that I don't use at all. I wouldn't be surprised if I went and tried to turn them on and they were broken in some way as replacements. I definitely used to be a much bigger TV guy, and like it was even concerning me. Like I have all these DVDs and Blu-rays of anime back when I was an anime fan, and I'm like, I really should find some time to actually watch some of them that I've never even watched, or go back and rewatch things. But yeah, if I were to ever move, I definitely would think about downsizing in a lot of ways, and TVs would definitely be one of them. One big 60-inch TV, or if I couldn't afford that, two nice like 30-inch TVs. Like right now I have like 3 TVs that I'm using as monitors for 99% of the time, and then on occasion I use them actually as TVs. And I think I definitely would want to go more to high dynamic range, and then 4K, more than just bigger sizes. OLEDs, if they compared to LCDs, if I could afford it, might be a consideration, but maybe not. The high dynamic range element is much more important than specifically the technology to get to the high dynamic range concept. Compared to my main TV with the bevel, the black bars of plastic around the screen is really big compared to a more modern one where the black bars have just gotten smaller and smaller. Like the most recent TV I have has black bars around the edges that's about a fourth the width as my old TV. Yeah, I do occasionally think about like moving into an apartment and trying to downsize into that level, and it would be very, very difficult for me. I have way too much stuff, and it would probably be very difficult to just for me to live, let alone live comfortably in an apartment. And I imagine that's the case for most people that live in an apartment, is that they're living very difficultly and probably working towards staying outside of their apartment as much as possible. Moving on, Elden Ring has sold 12 million copies, Bandai Namco claims. I don't know why we have to say a claim here, though. Sold 1 million in Japan, which I guess shows that Japan alone cannot make a game succeed financially compared to a worldwide success. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese companies from Soft are way happier about the 1 million in Japan than the other 11 million outside of Japan. Again, I don't know why you need to say claims, though. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl players can finally trade with strangers online. 4 months after release, a new update opens the Global Wonder Station. Which, yeah. I'm not exactly sure how the online services work for most Nintendo games. I would assume that most Nintendo games don't even really use online services, other than maybe a dozen of them, and that the experience is pretty rough, I imagine, on most of them. Of course, you need the Nintendo Switch Online membership thing, which sucks. Plus, I could definitely see there being trouble ahead around people trading either glitched Pokemon or stolen Pokemon or very bad quality Pokemon for a high quality Pokemon. It's also a little weird that this is the visuals for the remake of Diamond and Pearl, but that seems to be the consistent idea, is that older Nintendo games, or games that they don't want to go for the hyper-realistic graphics, are going for more of the, you would definitely call this chibi animated art style. It makes sense in something like Link's Awakening, which is a really old game, and you have to make something, and you have to make something fairly cheap because it's a short game, and you're just not going to get as much of money back, I imagine. But it would have made more sense to stick with the sword and shield art style a little bit closer, which is not too far off this art style anyways, but it does seem like they're taking 3 or 4 steps away from the art styles when they should try and keep everything very unified and looking about the same. Particularly when you think, like, for the most part, the 3D models for the Pokemon need to stay the same between all games. Nobody wants to remake hundreds upon hundreds of 3D models for the same characters. And that should probably be the case for everything. The problem, I think, also with trading Pokemon is you inherently, if you are going to benefit from a trade, are going to want to trade a bad Pokemon for a better Pokemon. It's not going to be a case where somebody's going to trade their favorite Pikachu for their favorite Eevee, for someone else's favorite Eevee. Because it's right in the title, you've got to catch them all. That's the idea that they propagate and then make pretty much impossible to achieve. I think if you really think about it, the only way Pokemon works is, even from day one when there was only 150 Pokemon, there needed to be a spot after defeating each of the gym leaders in which you were given a significant amount of like low-level Pokemon to fill in your Pokedex. I'm just gonna lose here, so I might as well just lose. Like, my only hope would have been if this had worked. And since this guy is being influenced by something. Could do this, I could summon this, and I guess that plays a spell card, so we'll do it. And then we should just end the turn at that point. Yeah, the only thing I can think is if we just got a network disconnect, but doesn't seem like we're going to get that. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Uncharted could be released for PC in July according to an internal Steam release dates. Developers are required to include a planned release date in the Steam backend, but they could be placeholders. The Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, I think, does not include the first couple of Uncharted games though, so it still feels like you really wouldn't really want to play Uncharted on PC unless it just doesn't really matter to you about playing games in order while you've already played the Uncharted games. It may be that the first couple of Uncharted games are just too rough and that they'll never bother to port them over or remake them. Which at a certain point, I think the Uncharted series is ready for a reboot. If the Tomb Raider series is ready for a reboot after 3 games, the Uncharted series is ready for a reboot after 4 games. Just reboot the whole thing. The movie had no effect on it, and nobody should have really expected any effect from it. But yeah, I saw on Reddit a couple days ago somebody saying, what video game would be really good if it was turned into a movie, and it was a depressingly large amount of people that still have movies that they want made from video games, when the obvious answer, and it seems like, I guess it's not the obvious answer, but it's the answer in my book for sure, is none. There will never be a video game movie that is particularly good, because you are going from a superior format to an inferior format. In the same way, there will never be a painting that is good when converted into a book or description of the painting. It just does not work that way. Interactive experiences that have developed decades of tricks as far as giving a better experience cannot then be converted to an inferior linear storyline format and be good, or be better than the game at least. There might be a scenario where you get a good, like, BioShock movie or something, but it won't be better than the BioShock game, not by far. Plus, almost every video game is much longer than movies, so if it were to really have anything of even a slight chance, you would require a mini-series to happen to cover the full story. And even in that case, I don't think like the Halo TV series or anything like that has a high chance of being better than Halo. Moving on, Horizon Forbidden West's latest update includes quests and graphics fixes. They're also investigating additional graphics issues and problems with transversal. Kind of notably, we have stopped hearing anybody really talk about Horizon Forbidden West. Doesn't feel like there was a major rejection of it, other than maybe just mainstream video game journalists losing interest. Losing interest in the game and not really finishing it as far as its grindy, repetitive levels. But yeah, if Horizon Forbidden West was a particularly great game, people would still be talking about it. It's not like there's been a bunch of new games to replace it. And it still is definitely a case where most video game journalist sites feel like they are not reporting on much of anything, and they are just taking it easy. Moving on, Devolver Digital's co-founders' new company will specialize in medically therapeutic games, which I think that probably means he's not working at Devolver Digital anymore. So this is barely video game news, unless this is a case that he actually is just founding a whole second company. Nothing stops a person from founding 2 companies or being in charge of 2 companies, other than just logical sense as far as how much time do you have. Can you really jump between 2 companies and make them succeed? Medically therapeutic games is an interesting idea, but it is an idea that I've never seen implemented well. So we'll see if they ever release anything worth reporting on. At the moment, it's not really much of video game news at all. Like, new companies get started all the time, and it doesn't matter who starts the new company. It matters what products they have and are they any good. Konami has updated its Silent Hill trademark in Japan. I don't think this means much of anything, although we are playing a Konami game at the moment, so maybe there really would be an effort here to start to think about making another Silent Hill reboot. Although they would do it without anybody of note actually working on Silent Hill, although in all fairness, the people of note that worked on Silent Hill in the past weren't really of note, so. Let's see, Returnal's new survival mode is shown off in an 18-minute gameplay video, if you're interested in that. Here they have an article specifically just talking about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's DLC going live. I guess I do probably want to get Mario Kart 8, but I also have this concern about, is there a way to get the DLC for some of these games without having to get Nintendo Switch Online services and also potentially downloading things and having to purchase the DLC. Ideally, I would hope that Mario Odyssey's DLC, that there is a version of that cartridge that has the DLC on the cartridge. And ideally, I'd hope that there's a Mario Kart 8 version of the cartridge that would include the DLC content there. Yes, we just destroyed this card. Put this back on the field. Let's see. Activate this effect. Change that to an 8, then activate this to then summon this, sacrificing that. I may have won here. It would be kind of hard for me specifically to justify playing Mario Kart 8 though, because I really would just be playing the single player experience and that's it, which is fine, but I may not have won here. Moving on, Private Division has announced 4 new publishing partnerships. Games aren't likely to be published or revealed for some time. It's been a while since I've even heard anything from Private Division. I guess it's a publishing label of Take-Two Interactive. And here we have 4 companies, video game development companies that I do not recognize at all. So in a lot of ways, this is just an announcement for an announcement that's coming out in several years. It's really not news. Let's see. eFootball, Rocket League, and Dota 2 are going to headline the Commonwealth Esports Championships, which I guess that's probably good for esports. I'm yawning. A new Starfield developer diary discusses character creations and factions, which I guess that tells me there are factions in Starfield. I'm still very concerned or uncertain as to what really Starfield is going to be. Like, the assumption is that it's going to play and look a lot like Fallout 4 or Skyrim or Elder Scrolls Online, some weird mix of those mechanics with different visuals, but I'm not 100% certain that it isn't going to play fairly differently, and definitely it'll look fairly different. Starfield might be the game. I mean, it might be great if it is the game that has basically no sweet rolls, no garbage items, no vendor trash, nothing like that, and instead is very much more concise and thought out and has actual level design and concepts that are well polished. Moving on, Supermassive and 2K announced a new horror game called The Quarry, which I would almost assume it's part of the Dark Pictures series, but maybe not, because it's not being advertised as that. Which, the problem with the Dark Pictures anthology series, though, is that far too many of those games have not been particularly good or worth talking about. They, in a lot of ways, are just horror Telltale game style experiences, or at least that's what they feel like, as far as I could ever figure. And being horror limits your audience, and being a mostly dialogue Telltale choose your own adventure visual novel experience limits your audience too. And it would almost make sense if there was a special like puzzle or gameplay mechanic that was unique to all the Dark Picture series, some kind of like medallion or something that you had to manipulate in different ways. Basically, I'm describing like a Hellraiser cube or something, I guess. But yeah, I suppose if there was a Hellraiser cube and you had to like solve the Hellraiser cube, the lament configuration in multiple different ways every now and then, that would make sense. So that just lost there because of this effect. If I understood this guy's effect better, I probably wouldn't have attacked, and I possibly would have won. Here is an interesting bit of news. Tunic has had a surprise launch on Xbox Game Pass. This is a Zelda-inspired adventure that's available to play now. Definitely looks Zelda-like, except for you're playing as a fox. And if this comes to PC, outside of if this comes to Steam, fairly quickly, I could see myself buying it and playing it. And then I could say, hey, here's the beginnings of what could take down Nintendo's stranglehold on nostalgia. If Tunic is a really good Zelda, Zelda 1, Zelda 2 inspired experience, or Zelda 1 inspired experience, I guess more than 2, then maybe there isn't a reason as much to buy a Switch and play Link's Awakening and then not be able to make that footage. It certainly would give me something to talk about. Ideally, it would have been great if this game had come out a month earlier for me, because if I had played Tunic and then played Zelda, nope, I guess that wouldn't have worked. Like, this is actually, I guess, coming out fairly at the perfect time for me, because if Tunic does come to Steam and it's relatively cheap and I can afford it, which maybe I can't, having just bought a Switch, I could now potentially get Tunic and play it and talk about Link's Awakening. Although, if I wait even a month, I'll probably forget about everything that happened in Link's Awakening. And certainly, if I was going to cover this game, I'd probably want to mostly focus on just criticizing it for its own experience, not using it as a vehicle to talk about something different, because that is the kind of thing that irritates people for sure when you have a clickbait article talking about something like Tunic and then you spend the whole time talking about Zelda instead. Although you can't ignore the influences. Ignoring the actual coverage of the game is not a thing people appreciate. And then next, WrestleQuest, an RPG starring WWE legends, has been announced. Booker T, Andre the Giant, and more were featured. So I assume that this is a officially licensed game. At a certain point, this makes a lot of sense. Like, I think they've been down the path as far as they can go, as far as just making wrestling simulation games. So, making the characters who are the more interesting parts of it talk more, which that's what most of wrestling is anyways, is talking, and then making an RPG world around it, I think makes a lot of sense. At least I would hope that they could make that make a lot of sense. I don't know why he did that. I guess that was probably the right move, because now I can activate this. And so I got that extra card. Special summon this by then sacrificing these. Put that on the face. Go ahead and activate this. And activate this. The only thing I'd really say though is, at some point, even though I know WWE owns the likeness to these wrestlers anyways, and it basically did make up these characters because it's not the real names or the real personas or personalities, at some point I think it would start to make some sense to disconnect completely from real world people, and maybe something like WrestleQuest could get you down that path where you have characters that are parodies or just straight up whole cloth new characters that don't have real world equivalents. Because you definitely have the problem of somebody like Booker T or Andrew the Giant getting canceled for doing something inappropriate, and then your game has that stink on it. Whereas a fake character made up completely wouldn't have that problem. Speaking of WWE, it's not video game related, but one of the wrestlers apparently died. I don't think he died specifically directly because of wrestling, but he may very well have died because of the stress on his body from wrestling, and that's pretty impossible to prove. Yeah. Moving on, we're up to the Gamatsu articles. Overwatch 2 player versus player closed beta test is set for late April, and that's a March 10th article. We have hit a point now where the bug has opened up articles that are incredibly old to the point where I don't even remember them. I do think I figured out what the problem is. It seems like what's happening is that when an article title is saved, it's occasionally saved with quotation marks when it doesn't actually have quotation marks around it. So I need to strip out the quotation marks is what I think I need to do to make sure it runs always, which is somewhat easy to do. A little JavaScript to remove them. So things like this Outward Definitive Edition is probably old news, since this is all from the 10th and we're at the 16th now. Yeah, these are all old articles. Let's see. 28 minutes of gameplay for Euden Chronicles from the 14th. Ashen developer announcing an open world action RPG called Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn for everything. Still really struggling here to get victories. While we're at it, let's come back to the menu and just see this. It's definitely going to be weird whether I'm going to want to keep Master Duel installed on my Nintendo Switch. Like, the scenario would basically be that my cell phone broke and my computer broke at the same time, and I wouldn't be able to daily log in on anything else. Although I could also just keep it installed to see if maybe it improves the way it works, or maybe it's more playable if you use the touchscreen. Wouldn't be surprised if it is more playable. I do believe at this point we are probably not quite over 10,000, but nearly over 10,000. So I could theoretically open like 100 packs instead of 50 packs. Or, yeah. I think I may be wrong about that. I may actually only be able to open 10 packs instead of 5 packs in a new expansion. I still think I'd probably stay about half of that though and just do the 5,000 gems worth of purchases, whatever 5,000 gems is worth. Let's see. Moving on to Gamatsu things. AI to Somnium Files. Nirvana Initiative details new investigations and Somnium elements. Which... okay. I don't think I ever got a full grasp as far as what this game is. It definitely looks pretty weird. Bleach Brave Souls for the PS4 is now available. This was a free-to-play 3D action game that for cell phones, I believe, originally. Yeah, iOS and Google Play in 2015, now coming to the PS4, which I suppose there is a slight question as to whether we will start to see more mobile games, particularly like Konami and Capcom mobile games based off of animes. Whether we'll start to see those kinds of things brought to the PlayStation 4, particularly to target the Japanese market. I don't feel like the telecommuting process is that big in Japan to the point where you would expect them to stop running on the train and playing on their cell phones while they're riding on the train, and you would expect Japanese people to go to school or work in person less. I don't think the pandemic would have changed their lifestyles that much. So I think it'd be fairly silly for people to start releasing cell phone games on the PlayStation 4 for that reason. The reason why it's probably getting released on the PlayStation 4 is that it is probably easy and it gets them a few more players before they shut down the whole service as a free-to-play thing. There is potentially a scenario where these kinds of mobile free-to-play games could get released on consoles and then they could reboot everything and you could start over from scratch, which is something that I think would be somewhat appealing even for veteran players. If you told me Destiny Child, for instance, was going to release a new version on Steam and it was going to start over from scratch and everybody is going to start at square one with the same characters, and we kind of know where the new expansions and where the new content is going to come, I potentially would be interested in playing that, because that could be quite a better experience for me. Although the only thing you can't really catch up on Destiny Child is the 9 or so collab kids, that collab childs out there. So, like, with the exception of the collab stuff, it's fairly easy to catch up if you just keep playing for years and years, and I was able to do that. and the story gets added after the fact, so I didn't miss out on any stories. I just missed out on some early first year events. Interesting. Let's see. Gametsu has an article, Japan Fighting Game Publishers Roundtable number 3. Live stream is set for March 21st. Let's see. Here you can see Gametsu, being more Japanese focused, points out that the Xbox Game Pass adds Zero Escape the Nonary games first, then mentions all the other games, Shredder's Weird West, and more. Like the exact same article, but from a very different perspective as to what is important. Avalanche Studios co-founders have established a studio called Elemental Games. Original IP is in development. Readout 2 gameplay overview trailer and screenshots are available on Gametsu if you want to check those out. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin details its multiplayer new locations. You want to check that out. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak expansion launches June 30th. And then Tencent has acquired a majority stake in Tequila Works, promises to take original IPs to greater heights. Tequila Works was the makers of Rhyme, Deadlight, Guilt, The Sexy Brutale, Invisible Hours, and the upcoming Song of Nunu, a League of Legends story, which one of these feels very much different. Sexy Brutale is probably the only game that has been somewhat successful. Rhyme is a pretty bad game. It's an average game at best. Deadlight Guilt, I don't know about. The Invisible Hours, I don't think was particularly successful. Alright, let's do this. Let's do this. Do this. I wouldn't be surprised if Tequila Works really has just been acquired to consistently work on that. Ooh, 2 gold. Consistently work on League of Legends experiences and games. Let's start going over some of the games on Steam. Rogue PG looks like nothing of interest, so that's a no. Auto World Tycoon looks like a car tycoon game of no interest. Deadberg looks like an asset flip Minecraft clone, zombie shooting. With zombie shooting. Stone Protectors might actually be a game with some nostalgia or history behind it, so I'll put it on the fall list. It is pretty expensive at $11, English only, from Pico Interactive is the publisher, which they're one of the 2 or 3 people who publish and put out old games. Although Pico Interactive might be the one that people don't really like. Here we have a Integrity Puzzles, which just looks like a jigsaw puzzles. So no to that. Aethernaut looks like it might be a puzzle game like Myst, but also could very well just be kind of an asset flip. Nothing experience, but I'll give it a follow. $16.99, English and French. attack. An inch. Here we have a game called Wobble Dogs, which is overwhelmingly positive. 3D pet simulator, raise your own personal hive of mutating dogs, physically simulated all the way down to the guts. I don't think there's a game here I really want to play, but I can't ignore this overwhelmingly positive reviews, so I'm going to put it on the fall list. If anything, I'm making an exception in the opposite direction here, because by all rights I should just put it on the wish list, but I'm not willing to do it for this game. Next we have Lazy Galaxy, which looks like nothing. Here we have a game called Virago, which may be something, but probably isn't. Put that on the fall list. Hellful, The Last Hope. Looks like it's probably just an asset flip first person shooter. Don't think we need to care about that. See, Once in My Head. There might be something to this, but it definitely feels like it has just a weird art style. And then the screenshots aren't really implying any actual gameplay. If anything, seems like you have to watch the trailer to actually get any idea of what the game is. So I'll give that a follow. English and Russian $2.99, that's pretty cheap. Probably too cheap. Here we have Not Our Home 2, where I feel like Not Our Home 1 came out just a couple days ago. Definitely feels like an asset flip horror game. And it says coming soon. So note of that. We have Medusa's Heart of Stone, which the animation seems a little rough in the cutscenes, but alright in the actual gameplay. This looks a little rough. There might be something to this, but it's a free-to-play chapter 1, which I also assume means that they'll start selling it as chapters and for money later on. Tiny Island is a hidden object game on tiny islands, which there is something to that idea. Certainly, $6.59 English and Russian. It may not be worth it though, if there's like only 5 islands and 5 items on the islands. Yeah, these screenshots are implying some real simplicity here. All it says is various levels, which that's definitely not a number. Here's a game called Pop Top Adventure, which seems like it's just a coin collecting game. Doesn't look terrible. I guess the question really just comes down to a Sonic clone like this. Is that something I'd ever really want to play? Particularly, it's a different experience when you can play some, if not all, of the Sonic games on Steam, compared to like Nintendo games that don't have their old games on Steam. I've probably lost here. Next we have a game on Steam called Stern, which looks like it might be a platforming shooter. Might even be a Metroidvania game. $6.99 English and Russian. All of a sudden we're seeing a lot more English and Russian games again. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else came down and made the decision to say, no, we're not going to block games just because they support English and Russian as languages. Or I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian troll game or the Russian money laundering game developers out there, if they truly exist, have found a way to still do what they were doing, and they're just using shell corporations outside of Russia. Here we have a Hidden Objects Tranquil Valley, which, yeah. Again, I think we're going to get down this path where we start to see all hidden object games are going to start to look like this, where it's basically asset flip 3D environments looking for hidden objects instead of flat 2D images looking for hidden objects. And if that's the route it goes down, then we need to reevaluate how careful I'm looking at those kinds of games and whether I'm putting them on the fall list or not. Here we have a what looks like Diablo clone with some space elements. Escape from Chronos X. I'd probably say no to this, but I'll be generous and give it a fall list. Put it on the fall list. Here we have Roxy's Raccoon Pinball Panic, which, I'm a sucker for pinball, so I'll put this on the fall list, but generally it does not look visually polished enough. You know, it did occur to me that Tuesday is probably the best day for me to play Switch games and take a day off. Because Tuesday late in the evening is when Giant Bomb happens. And Giant Bomb Cast happens, and that would be about the only weekly extra couple hours of podcast to listen to. Back to Gamatsu, EA Play Live to skip 2022. Here's an article I didn't actually show. Elden Ring shipments and digital sales top 12 million. D3 Publisher and Lancaris have announced Edo Japan set roguelike survival action game called Edo Ed-0 Zombie Uprising for PC. Apparently this has also been updated, although they have no pictures or anything, so it seems a little premature to even announce anything if you've got nothing to show. I can't help but feel like some of these companies put out game announcements because they're terrified of leaks. When a leak or a rumor about a game when you have nothing to show would be fine. Like, Famitsu has its review scores for issue 1737, or Gametsu has it. Really only reviewing Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid Burst Forth Chorogon Breath, giving it 27 out of 40, being a shoot 'em up game based on an anime. That's pretty bad. The multiplayer stealth game Deceiving Incorporated has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, which stealth game is questionable as to what they mean by that. It kind of has the art style of like an Evil Genius game, but 3 people all working together to be stealthy is a weird concept. Let's see, Arcade Spirits, the new challengers, launches May 27th. The new trailer introduces characters, and I guess each of these characters, much like a Neptunia game, are supposed to represent specific archetypes of like different kinds of gamers. Like, although I don't know what a lightning bolt here really would represent. Cat looking kind of like Catwoman. Green Arrow kind of looking like Green Arrow. Just a controller. I assume that's supposed to be, she's a generic gamer. Really, this looks like this is just a visual novel, and it is just a visual novel. And I really have to question whether there was an Arcade Spirits originally. Seems like you're doing a lot more than just talking and dating people. No, you probably aren't doing a lot more. You probably just have a couple of interesting background art that implies you can actually play RPG style gameplay, and then you actually don't. Suffice it to say, Arcade Spirits new challengers, it does not catch my attention. We already talked about Private Division publishing new games, Die Gut Fabric, Evening Star, Piccolo Studio, and Yellowbird Games. Being the game developing companies that they're publishing. Returner version 3.0 update Ascension Tower of Sisyphus has gameplay video. Gamatsu has Lost Judgment expansion, the Kaito files, Bruiser and tank style gameplay. This is just Lost Judgment beating up people. Ed-Zero Zombie Uprising has a debut trailer, details and screenshots, and actually seeing what the characters look like is way more interesting. So you have like a sumo guy here that's just gonna open hand slap zombies and monsters. It's almost taking the idea of like an Onichamba game and getting away from the bikini anime girl with a sword, and instead giving it to more weird looking characters. Or at least one particularly weird looking characters, and the art style otherwise looks kind of just different. I heavily suspect that this game isn't going to be one of these B tier, C tier style games. Moving on, Sniper Elite 5 launches May 26. I would have sworn Sniper Elite 5 had already come out, but whatever. Hard West 2 has been announced for PC, due out in 2022. Which I guess makes sense, then the Hard West 1 would have been on the Xbox Game Pass. Not 100% sure though what Hard West is. It's tagged as a strategy game. Yep, it does look like it's an XCOM, like, positional placement game. I really need to wrap up today because I'm just dragging. Need to wrap up and go back to sleep. Let's see, we already talked about The Quarry being announced by 2K and Supermassive Games. Lost Eidolons launches in Q3 for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC, no PlayStation. Curse to Golf adds an Xbox Series and Xbox One version, which I wonder if Curse to Golf is like a spiritual successor of a previous golf game, or kind of strategy puzzle golf game. Let's see what happens here. Let's see, an escape puzzle game, Escape Academy, has been announced for basically everything. Which, okay. This does look visually polished enough that there might be something to it. If anything, it even looks like it might have more dialogue and story than most escape games do. And then Trek to Yomi has a combat trailer, according to Komatsu, if you want to check that out. And we're back to games on Steam. Fire on Fight looks like nothing. Graduator looks like it might be a Chinese-only platforming game. Korean only. Alright. Let's go and play this. Oh man. Really sucks when I'm just like this sleepy. It's very difficult to think straight, very difficult to talk. It definitely highlights how I am at least minorly disabled or crippled by these insomnia bursts of inconsistency. I definitely wouldn't trust myself to be driving a car right now. I wouldn't trust myself to be driving a forklift right now if I even knew how to drive a forklift. Those are all just things out of the realm. I probably wouldn't trust myself to be doing much of anything. And at a certain level, if this were the good old days for that it seemed like it was for the baby boomer generation, I probably, if I was working behind the desk, would be sneaking under the desk or just sleeping at the desk right about now, taking a power nap. And that's certainly not something most people can get away with these days, whereas it definitely was the case that people could get away with that in the past, or some people could. Not everybody. Anyways, moving on, we have a game on Steam called The Eternal Battlefields, which doesn't look like much. English and Bulgarian, that's an interesting combination of languages. We have Batsumaru. Looks like some kind of puzzle game that's probably a little too simplistic. Not sure how you actually would play this now. Feels like it is kind of just a Minesweeper clone, really. Maybe something slightly different from a Minesweeper clone, but visually it just looks too simplistic to want to play. Here we have Velocity Legends action racing game. Seems like nothing. Here we have Emoji Merge puzzle matching, which seems like nothing. Here we have a mobile game for a coin pusher experience that I wouldn't hate a coin pusher game. I just hate that it's in this screen format. $13.49 English Japanese, way too expensive also. Here we have Vitality Girl 3 Pixel, which does not look like anything, and I feel like these Vitality Girl games also have come out very close to each other. You know what, I realized the things I would like to see Valve do, and that I've said Valve should do, such as limit the number of games any one publisher can put out per month, are basically the exact things that the Nintendo Seal of Quality required. So it's not like it's even a new concept. If Valve just slightly implemented some limitations on the games that it allows on Steam, it would be probably very helpful for people who are trying to make actual good games, and it would just save them a ton of time. Because when you look at a game like Adventure Cat Adventure 2 here, like, this is a great example of something that's not really up to a level of quality that should be on Steam, in my opinion. It's 59 cents, it's English, it's cheap, but it really is just kind of an asset flip platforming game with nothing special going on. Or here you have a game called Please Kill It, which is just an asset flip first person shooter, which is also Chinese only. Here we have Arachnium, I don't even know how you pronounce that. Some kind of spider game, but the spiders are little squares. Definitely doesn't look that interesting. They're comparing it to Cuphead and Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which those two games alone are not similar. VR Canoid brick breaking game. You know what? I actually think one of my suggestions, I might just decide to email Gabe Newell directly. Come to think of it, like that idea of having all the credits of people, voice actors and such, and having that be part of their website and a way to search isn't a terrible thought. And it's not particularly an aggressive thought either. Whereas some of the things I tell Gabe Newell to potentially do or add to Steam would be pretty aggressive, and I imagine they would just ignore. This is particularly additive and something that I think would benefit everybody, including Valve. Anyways, as far as this game, Arkanoid, VR Arkanoid breaking. This is how you would make a Arkanoid game with big giant paddles. So visually, though, it's not that polished. I'm gonna give this a follow list and see if people like it. It definitely doesn't look as good as something like Beat Saber. Here we have a game called Luminary Online Rise of the Gunzi, which looks like it's a Chinese mobile game. It's been ported, although it says English only, oddly. Definitely doesn't feel like it would be an English only game. Regardless, it still looks like a mobile game, and I'm still going to say no to it. Next we have Spirit Detective, which there might be something to this. I don't think I can win here. Yeah, it didn't work. Here we have a game called Spirit Detective. There might be something to this. I guess the question is this a single player game? Because it says online co-op. I think it's online co-op focused. It's an asymmetric game where you're running around either being a ghost or trying to find the ghost. So it kind of feels like a more Asian take on the idea of an asymmetric player versus player game. I still think I'd say no to that. Here we have a game called Colors Maze 2, which looks way too generic to make it to the follow list. Here we have a game called Good Night, which looks like it's just a horror asset flip game. So, yep, nothing there. Here we have Stay Away from Zombies, which looks like a dark screenshot horror game. Yep, far too dark. $1.19 English only. Here we have a game called Safeguard, which looks like nothing. English and Chinese and languages. Here we have a game called Hope Line, which is already mostly negative, which is weird because it actually looks like it's a little bit better of an asset flip than most. Maybe that got more people to play it. Online PvP, English and Chinese again. I think we can say that's going to be our last game, because I definitely don't have the mental bandwidth. We are getting basically nowhere as far as trying to get to the 4th rank, because you have to have a 3 in a row win. That's just not happening. And this is the new solo mode here. Made a secret progress. Let's see. Here we have a game called Ultimate Super Bean, which doesn't look like anything of interest. We have about 5 more new games. Smudge Coin Run, which looks like nothing. We haven't had any really great games come out today. Spirit of the Island is another one of these Stardew Valley farming sim games that I just don't think I'd ever really be interested in. I like the trees in it though, I will say. It's early access for $22.49, which is quite a lot. Yeah, I kind of like this tree art style. That stands out to me for some reason. We have something called Zazari VR. Is this an actual puzzle game? Because it kind of feels like it should be a puzzle game. Be a very nice looking puzzle game. But I don't think it is. I think it's maybe just a visual game where you fly around, or no, I guess it is just a Skyrim-like game. Which, in all fairness, like, if you make something that is fantasy world and looks like Skyrim in VR, you've still done something fairly successful. $22.49 is pretty expensive for a VR game, but this also looks like it might have that visual polish to justify that. Next we have Seaside Driving, which looks like nothing of interest. Then we have Battle 19XX, which looks like nothing. Then we have Slurpy Derpy. I don't... It's like a clicker game, it looks like. Yeah, I just don't think there's enough here being shown in the screenshots that would make me actually want to play this. It's in-app purchases, English, allegedly full audio, free to start, free to play. Office Management 101 here is just a office manager simulator, so no to that. And Tunic. I'm going to put Tunic on the fall list, but I'm going to leave the tab open because I suspect just reloading, well, actually, yeah, just reloading already puts it over 30. So, yeah, I'm going to add it to the wish list instead. Everybody's pretty positive of it. The only real concern here might be the price. $29.99 is not too bad. The only real question, I suppose, after that point would be how many people have actually finished the game. Because there is a danger I've never really considered before, in which a bunch of people play the first couple hours of a game, really love it, and then something terrible happens in the back half or at the end of the game, and most people don't wait in that initial launch window to find out if that's a smart move. This is a developer who's never made anything else on Steam, and a publisher who has published this game and this game and this game and this game and that game. Yeah, I suppose I should e-bag at this point and say if somebody friended me on Steam and gifted me Tunic, now would be the perfect time for me to play it and cover it. And I, even in that case, would make a special effort to play the footage, make the footage, and get it out in less than a month, and just have a extra game launching. Yeah, as for Chicory, Colorful Tale, I guess that we can promote that from the fall list. Overland. Turn-based survival game. I'll wishlist that too. I don't know if I really want to play Wilmot's Warehouse though. Visually it just doesn't look that good. And matching things and sorting things. gonna think about that one and just put it on the follow list. This one, Paramical, looks like it's really just a music experience game, so I can say no to that. And then Capsule here, I don't think is enough of a game. As we start to look at their older games, they don't look as good. And then here we have Survive the Night from a different developer, and that just looks like garbage. So that would bring me to the GameDeveloper.com articles. Tencent has bought a majority stake in the rhyme developer Tequila Works. It's interesting that you would call it the rhyme developer, but I guess that is the biggest game that they would be known by. Then Devolver Digital co-founder launches a publisher for FDA approved games, which, as a publisher, getting your games approved by the Food and Drug Administration for use as some kind of hospital style game seems a little weird focus, but there might be a niche there. It almost also feels like it might be just a gimmick for sure, that a few games are going to try and get FDA approval and even get it, and then it's going to prove to not be worth the effort or helpful to be FDA approved. I wouldn't be surprised if the FDA never approves the game at all, because why would they? GameDeveloper.com says Elden Ring has sold 12 million copies. And ARM apparently is going to reduce its workforce by up to 15% after the Nvidia deal collapses. Nvidia tried and failed to buy ARM in a deal worth 40 million. Which, at a certain level, if ARM doesn't right its ship, we may very well stop seeing ARM chips and ARM architecture in chips in favor of either AMD reduced instruction set chips or Intel reduced instruction set chips. I wouldn't even be surprised if we start to see Raspberry Pi or expressive chips starting to show up in some devices. Although I'm not sure Raspberry Pi or expressive are really up to that challenge. And it may very well be a slow process in which people still just are using the same architecture from ARM for the next 10 years before any other competitor can even scale up and develop something to compete with it. Because right now an AMD or Intel mobile chip still is nowhere as good as an ARM chip as far as cost and power consumption. Power consumption probably more than even cost. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com says EA Play 2022 has been scrapped because, quote, things aren't lining up. That means multiple delays and cancellations. GDC says keep calm and GDC on with these wellness classes if you want to see that. The Communication Workers of America Union backs an anti-merger bill that could end anti-competitive deals. The CWA believes the legislation would protect workers and help scrutinize mergers like the Activision Blizzard deal. Although, almost certainly, this new law probably wouldn't affect the Activision Microsoft deal. There's definitely some anti-competitive mergers that have been allowed. Certainly, when you see like T-Mobile and Sprint merging together, that was pretty anti-competitive. When you see non-video game companies merge, there's usually not even a lot of news about them. But yeah. At a certain level, though, all unions should be lobbying, and so the Communication Workers of America, who seem to be more and more interested in being the union of note for video game companies, are going to lobby for their side, hopefully, for their member sides. There is always the danger, though, that the CWA brings in and unionizes a whole bunch of employees and then just collects dues and doesn't actually successfully achieve any improvements as far as work conditions or salary or pay or job stability. I don't know how it could be much worse for video game developers, but it might. Then we already talked about Private Division signing publishing deals with 4 new game studios, and it almost feels like they are brand new game studios. And then here we have Poppy's Playtime on the fall list, which I think this is a VR game. Nope. Further chapters or DLC. There are no DLC things to purchase. This came out in October of 2021. It's definitely looks like it's a Five Nights and Fridays clone, but yeah, I just don't think that there's a game here. But it is also rated very positively. So I'm just going to leave it on the fall list and see if DLC ever comes out for it. Give it another 6 months to a year. Here we have a game called Ponpu. Some kind of Bomberman style game. Although it kind of also feels Zelda-like. Now this only has 28% positivity and it's 71% positive reviews. 28 reviews. I think I put this on the wish list. I don't think I'm super enthusiastic about Ponpu, but it looks close enough. Whereas Pon Pon here needs more time. Pom Pom. Pombero here as a horror game is mixed, so we can remove that from the fall list. Police Simulator, Officers on Patrol. Yeah, I really would have to question whether I would want to ever play this. It does seem like you're playing as police in the UK. Nope, it says American City. If I was to get this game and play 911 Simulator and get that game, I don't know if I've bought that either. There'd be an interesting series there. But the whole problem is, at a certain level, this game is either going to have us become a bad cop, or it is just going to de facto feel like propaganda in my mind. Because if you play as cops and it's a clean cop that deals with only other clean cops, then that's gonna be weird. Certainly. But yeah, I just don't know if there's a real experience here I would want to play. I feel like it would probably lead me to a lot of rants that people already have heard, I'm sure, from a lot better sources than me, as far as the state of police enforcement and law enforcement in the United States. We have a point-and-click adventure game, which is like a magical murder mystery experience. I'm gonna leave this on the fall list, but unfortunately it looks like it's never gonna have any relevancy. Here we have Poker Squadrons, which looks like it's a different type of solitaire game. And it's mostly positive. But right now I'm so sleepy, I just don't have the mental bandwidth to consider it. So I'm just going to leave it on the fall list. Here we have Pogo Champ, which I think we can get rid of Pogo Champ. Well, the idea of playing on a Pogo might be an interesting idea for a second or two. I don't think there's enough there to really go any further, and it feels like this game probably is just going to be abandoned in early access. Pocket Cars as a car racer is still early access from 2020, so I think we have to get rid of that. Plumber 3. I'll give this some more time and think about it. And then Plum needs more time also. So then that would take me back to my Twitter feed. And let me just scroll down my Twitter feed fairly quickly here, and then we'll call it a stream. Been going 3 hours and 12 minutes, and I'm lucky to make it that far. Eventually there is going to be a case here where I do just fall asleep midstream. Let's see. Not really a lot to talk about. There will be some things. Apparently Borderlands 3 will soon be getting crossplay for the PlayStation platforms, and an apparent Sony U-turn. That's from Video Games Chronicles. Unity apparently says that pandemic-driven player increases are here to stay. Player increases, I assume, meaning the number of people playing games, not some other weird metric like player price increases or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see price increases being blamed on the pandemic. Well, it does look like there isn't anything new to really talk about, so that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.